And a very happy Wednesday to you at 12:07 in the West. It's the John Phillips Show, broadcasting today from DFW. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
You really got to go to Miko Cena. They've got the best queso.
I'm not here very long.
Johnny, Proposition 50 passed, and it passed overwhelmingly, according to Decision Desk HQ, with 87% of the precincts reporting. The yes side has 5.1 million votes. The no side, 2.9 million votes. It is passing 63.8 to 36.2.
This is what you call in the business a blowout.
In Los Angeles County, it passed 73 to 27. In San Francisco County, it passed 80 to 19.
And there was a piece out in Politico this morning that was just brutal on the no side. How there was no cohesion at all. I guess when all of this first started, the face of the no campaign was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then at some point, he decided that he wasn't going to do it. Charlie Munger came up with $30 million and said that if it was close, he would pony up and put more in. That didn't happen. The other groups that were raising money, God knows what they did with it because the money didn't make its way on television. I guess they were spending it, but they were spending it in ways that no one really saw. As a result of the lack of advertising and maybe other factors as well, the turnout among no voters was just not where it needed to be to beat this thing. It seems like people who wanted to vote no were complacent and just didn't show up.
If you look at registration, the California Republicans have 5.8 million registered voters. The no side currently has just under 3 million votes. In fact, if every single California Republican voted in this election, it would have beaten Prop 50. But of course, that never happens.
No, and I'll tell you, this is going to be a big problem for Republicans as we get closer to the midterm elections. And that is that Donald Trump, one of the things that he can do that other candidates on the right cannot, is he can motivate people who are non-traditional voters to go out and vote for him. People who don't usually vote Republican who like him will walk across glass to vote for him. We've seen that dynamic happen a number of times in primaries and generals in 2016, 2020, 2024. That has been the case. But that clearly does not translate to other candidates and other issues that he supports. If he's not on the ballot, those people, many of those people just stay at home. They'll show up for him. They won't show up for his allies. And I'm telling you, I know I'm right about this because I got emails. And not a couple of them. I got a bunch of them from people who told me they do not trust the mail. They think the election is rigged. So they're not going to vote through the mail. They're only going to vote in person. And then they change where you vote. And they consolidated it into just a few different voting centers per area. Well, that means you don't have the capacity that you normally have. So if the line is an hour and a half to vote and you only allocated 30 minutes, those people just went home. So there were a certain number of no voters who fully intended on voting but didn't, when it would have been so easy just to fill it out and put it in the mailbox in front of your house. It would have taken you 2 minutes, and they didn't do it because they thought that the system was rigged. And many of those people ended up not showing up, and that is reflected heavily in these numbers. If just the email that I got is true, as a percentage of our audience, that's just attrition that you cannot have that existed in yesterday's election.
And there's been quite a lot of development since Prop 50 passed just little more than 12 hours ago. This, according to Ashley Zavala. Not only has there been a lawsuit filed by the California Republican Party, but one of the targeted Republicans, Ken Calvert in the Inland Empire, he's going to now run for another district, and apparently Kevin Kiley's going to do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. And Kevin Kiley is going to run against another member of Congress, a Democratic member of Congress, who used to represent a different district. And now the two of them are going to face off in a totally new district. Get ready for the musical chairs.
It's going to get ugly.
And because so many of these districts are just drawn to make sure that the Democratic candidate wins, in all likelihood, you're going to end up in a district that's very different than your district before, and you might be tied to an area that's nowhere near where you live. For example, if you live in Palm Springs, which is in Riverside County, you're now part of Darrell Ice's district in San Diego.
It's a little different.
You think? How about if you live in rural Northern California and you're now in a district that is based out of Marin that could be a 5 or a 6 hour drive from where you live?
I'd love to see a breakdown of how many freeways you have to take to get from one end of these districts to the other.
And I'll tell you, there's a couple of different takeaways from this. First of all, I don't know how the state of California is going to get people to turn out to vote. Because let's just say you're Randy and you live in Van Nuys in the city of Los Angeles. Do you realize that on your ballot the next time around, the first race you're going to get to that's competitive is going to be County Party Central Committee, and because you're a no party preference, you don't have that on your ballot.
I don't have that, and I'm proud to say I don't know what that is.
There will not be a contested election on your ballot unless there's two Democrats who make it to the runoff, in which case you're just voting on personality because ideologically there's not a whole lot of difference between them right now. How do you get someone who lives in that area to vote? And I'm not even just talking about the Republicans. If you're the Democrats, how do you motivate that person to vote?
Well, usually in Los Angeles, turnout is very low.
It's very low, but it's going to get lower because now there's nothing exciting. Typically what happens is you have an exciting race on the ballot that generates interest. If you feel like you have skin in the game, that's when you turn out to vote. It's like watching a game that you're not betting on. Isn't it so much more fun to watch a game that you have a little money riding on?
Even if it's a 20, it's something.
Is there anyone that watches the Liberty Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl who hasn't graduated from one of the schools playing in it who cares unless there's money riding on it? The answer is no. It's the excitement that gets people to turn out. Think about the NBA. Think about when you had these larger-than-life personalities. You had the Showtime Lakers, and you had Larry Bird and the Celtics, and then you had the Detroit Pistons, the Bad Boys, the Nasty Boys. Then you had the Chicago Bulls, where Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen became a thing. You had these dynasties all going against one another. My God, people couldn't get enough of that. But if you have a bunch of teams where no one knows the players, and one team is heavily favored to stomp all over the other, who's going to watch that? College basketball just started. And one of the things that these teams do, especially the big name schools, is they always schedule these body bag games at the beginning of the season. Because you don't want to schedule a non-conference game that you might lose and make you look bad before you start playing the teams in your division. So that's when they start playing schools that advertise on Maury. Who's UCLA playing this week? DeVry. I'm making that up, but you get the idea. You can't give tickets away to those games. You can't. Because some 45-year-old looking for a mid-career change is not going to beat whoever it is that UCLA recruited. It's just not going to happen. So they're playing in an arena that has a bunch of spectators who are dressed like empty seats. Nobody's going to go to that. Not even drunk college students. Nobody goes to those games. How we're going to get people in California to vote when there's nothing competitive on the ballot is beyond me. So voter participation is going to fall off a cliff. Now, that might be by design, but it's going to do that. If you're the Democrats to get people to turn out now, what you're going to have to do, and you can only play this game so many times, you're going to have to put something about gun control or abortion on the ballot as a ballot initiative every single election. That's what you're going to have to do. And hope that people get excited over some kind of gun control measure or some kind of abortion measure. Because outside of that, I don't know how you get anyone's attention. It certainly won't be from the competitive races. The other dynamic that happened yesterday that's really interesting, especially if you're Gavin Newsom, is that the Democratic voters, I'm talking about the people who are registered Democrats who cast ballots, hate Donald Trump so much and want to confront him so badly that what Gavin Newsom is doing may not be aggressive enough for him to win the nomination. Think about this. Let's just move away from California for a second. There is a candidate in New York City who won that election in a blowout who is a self-described socialist. That's not Jesse Waters calling him a socialist. That is him calling himself a socialist. And he's not one of these people who misunderstands the definition of what that actually means. He wants the government to own the means of production. He wants to get rid of the jails. He wants to make it so that public transit is free, and we know how great that works out. He wants to raise taxes on only white people to pay for his programs, and he thinks the government should own the grocery stores. And that election was not close.
The current numbers, according to Decision Desk HQ, with 97% of the vote in, Zoran Mamdani, 50.6% of the vote, Cuomo, a distant second at 41.7%, Curtis Sliwa at 7%. Even if one of those two had dropped out, they still weren't going to beat Mamdani.
And what's funny is, in California, we're all paying attention to Prop 50 because that's what matters to us. Nationally, the focus was on Mamdani in New York City, in part because the bold-faced names came out of the woodwork to celebrate this guy, including Barack Obama, who apparently is all jazzed up about this.
He ran a very exciting campaign.
He did. And then you have the guy in Virginia. I'm not even talking about at the top of the ticket because we knew that one was over before it started.
You're talking about Jay Jones, the now elect Attorney General.
Yes, he's the guy who in the text messages said he wanted to kill one of his Republican colleagues and then wanted to kill the children too. And usually that means you're done. Usually. And this guy won the election in part because female voters came in so big for him that he was able to withstand all of the negative attention that came from those text messages.
Currently in that race with 95% of the vote, Jay Jones at 52.9%. The opponent, Jason Miyares, I probably said that wrong, 47.1%.
So if you're Gavin Newsom and you think that swearing on podcasts is going to make you look like you're the biggest Trump hater on planet Earth, and authoring ballot initiatives is going to make you look like the biggest Trump hater on planet Earth, and your competitors want to put bullets in the Republicans' kids' heads, how can you compete with that? That's a tough putt. That's not even a putt that's on the green. That's something that most people use their pitching wedge for. We're talking about the tall grass here. And he's got to get his putter out, and he's got to try to sink that left-handed. You can't beat that if you're a professional politician. You just can't. And then you got the guy in New York saying, I want to get rid of the prisons. I want to tax white people higher than everyone else. Now, Newsom is willing to do anything to become president, but even that might be one bridge too far for him. But if that's where the attention is, and that's where the excitement is, Newsom's problem is that he's not going to be the loudest voice in the room for long. He was the loudest voice in the room for a period of time, and that's what propelled him to the top of the heap. But someone is clearly going to take that away from him, and he's going to have to make the choice. Is he going to turn the volume up himself to compete with these people? Or is he going to hope that the temperature in the room within the Democratic Party lowers and they're looking for someone who's not quite as hyperbolic as the people who won last night? I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not part of that party. So there are people who have their finger on the pulse in more accurate ways than I do. So we'll have to have some of them on the program at some point in the future and ask them about this, because that's a question that they as a party are going to have to answer. Because right now, to my eye, and again, I'm an outsider, but to my eye, they are in serious danger of losing control of their nomination. And by that, I mean what happened to the Democrats in 72 when George McGovern won it instead of the preferred candidate of the Democratic Party. In 2016, that happened to the Republicans, where you had the party establishment wanting Jeb Bush and the voters saying, no, 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 we're pissed off that you people want open borders. We're going with Donald Trump. That happened to the Republicans in 2016. I think the Democrats right now are in serious danger of losing control of their primary. 800-222-5222 if you want to weigh in on yesterday's election. 800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to go back and listen to an old episode that's maybe not about the election, maybe it's about Sheng Tao, or maybe it's about the Dong family, you can do that quite easily.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts.
And he said, absolutely.
Whether it's the Apple Podcast app,
Absolutely.
iHeart,
Absolutely.
Spotify.
That,
Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes.
How are
absolutely
you?
good.
Love to shake your hand.
Yes. It's been amazing.
You could do a Google on the YouTube. You can get the free KABC app. You can get the free KSFO app. Apparently, a lot of people have been downloading that app lately, so please continue to listen on that app. It's high quality. You get these Shang drops in high quality.
That's right. I like that. That was amazing.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Ken in L.A. Ken, hello.
Hi, John. How are you? I'm
Good.
sorry for asking that. Everybody does. Two quick comments about Democrats and Republicans. By the way, I went to a voting center yesterday because I'm a pro at crastinating, and the line was easily 2 hours. It wrapped almost around the block, but you don't have to sit in line. I took my filled out voting ballot, and I just handed it in. I was in and out. So I think that the problem with the Republicans in California is that, and I know most of the Republicans in my family and in my circle, they are the, quote, I'm a fiscal conservative and social liberal. Well, that's a dichotomy that doesn't work, because if you're a social liberal, you're for big spending, which means big government. And I think that the Republicans in this state, the true Republicans, they're not the as big as the count says. They're apathetic and they don't come out. They vote personality, not policy. The Democrats, on the other hand, I would agree with what you said about Democrats losing control, but this is not 1972, and this is not a Democrat Party that's reasonable, and they're not voting for George McGovern. They're really blowing out on these really far left policies and personalities. They're really coming out, and they're blowing the Republicans out. And if they're losing control, they're doing it. A majority are willingly doing it, and there's not a majority of reasonable Democrats to push back on. So I think it's incrementally that Democrats are gaining on measures like Proposition 50, and they're gaining in states, and incrementally it's going to trickle down. Hopefully not, but it's going to trickle down to nationally. Look at the crazy Democrats who are holding on and being elected and threatening what we call rational Democrats, who, like Chuck Schumer, who I don't call rational, but if they're losing control, the majority is taking over. That's my comment.
Well, it's interesting that you said that there are no more George McGoverns around in the Democratic Party today, because at the time, George McGovern was the left-wing alternative. And now you have people who make George McGovern look like Rush Limbaugh. Go back to Mamdani's speech last night. Who did he talk about when he first started speaking? He talked about Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs was a socialist candidate, a perennial candidate who ran for president in this country, who, like Mamdani, believed that the government should own the means of production. In fact, here's a fun fact for all you radio nerds out there. When Air America became a thing, that's when they decided that Al Franken would become the liberal Rush Limbaugh. And there was a left-wing group that decided that they were going to buy radio stations and put left-wing talk shows on the air. Well, in each big market, they had different affiliates. They had one in L.A., they had one in the Bay Area, they had them all over. And the one that was in New York City that actually took Alan Colmes' show at night, Alan Colmes, who was on with Sean Hannity for many years on Hannity and Colmes, talented radio broadcaster himself, former stand-up comic. But anyway, he was on that station. The station's call letters were WEVD, Eugene Debs' initials. The station was named after Eugene Debs because in those circles, in those socialist circles, that guy is the OG. That guy is the original gangster. He is the guy that they love. He is the ideological godfather to that crew. It's like if you talk to libertarian-minded Republicans, it's Barry Goldwater who is their hero. Well, for the left-wing version of that, it was Eugene Debs. That was the guy that they paid attention to, the guy that ran and didn't win, but whose ideology persisted. And right now, people who subscribe to that are winning elections. Now, to your point about voter apathy and the lack of turnout, I think in California, there's a couple of different things that are going on. One is if you're a Republican, and there are Republicans who are not happy with Trump, whether it's the tariffs or maybe some people are upset at immigration or whatever the case may be. There are people who are not happy. I don't happen to know many of them. I don't know many people who voted for him who aren't happy. What I notice in my own personal social network is that Republicans, especially if they're around my age or older, and I'm 45 years of age, are doing just fine financially. They're secure in their jobs. They own a house that has appreciated by leaps and bounds. If they have money invested in the stock market is hitting record highs. It seems like every time you turn on one of those business channels, they're talking about some stock going way up beyond whatever it was that the experts had predicted. And those people personally are doing just fine financially. And then you have a group of younger people, and I think this explains a lot in New York City. Younger voters who are drowning in debt. They go to these colleges that charge a fortune. They graduate with a degree that is essentially useless. They have a ton of debt. They're looking at high property values. So if you're my age, you look at high property values as a good thing. My house is worth a lot of money. I can borrow against it. I can sell it and I can downsize. If I decide to retire, I could go buy a condo somewhere cheaper and I can live like a king off of the money I make from my house. It's a great way of accumulating wealth in ways that middle-class people otherwise would never be able to do. So the fact that older people or people in that middle generation are benefiting, the younger crowd views that as an impediment to them achieving success. So that's why they want rent freezes. And that's why they want a socialist as mayor. And those arguments appeal to them. They want debt forgiveness. They like that. That's what Joe was trying to do when he was president and he was trying to hang around. Those arguments resonated with those people. And if you are a Republican in California who's doing fine financially, again, I put myself in that category, you're fat, dumb, and lazy, and you don't look at these elections as being a threat to your prosperity. And many people just sat it out. Many people just didn't vote. They didn't show up. They didn't take the 2 minutes that it would take to fill out that ballot. You're never going to have a shorter ballot in your life than the one that we just had. And there were still many people who went out and voted for Trump the last time around in California who couldn't be bothered to vote this time around. And the issues that impacted the left didn't impact the right on this round. I mean, take the government shutdown, for example. If you look at the cable channels, that's what they're talking about all the time. And someone came up to me the other day and they go, oh, this government shutdown, what do you think about that? I go, well, would we be better off if they'd be up and running? But personally, I don't work for the government, so it really hasn't impacted me that much. And they go, well, what about the SNAP benefits not going out? And I said, what about the SNAP benefits? And they go, yeah, people who rely on food assistance, they're not going to be getting their money from the government. And I remember saying to that person, well, if anyone needs a diet, it's those fat asses. Maybe we can spend the money on a treadmill. But I don't look at it as being a threat to civilized society, that, oh my God, the poor SNAP benefits aren't going out to the people who need them. It just doesn't bother me. And again, that leads to apathy for many people on the right. People on the left looked at that and they saw something that was offensive to them. And people on the right look at it and we just shrug our shoulders. Well, if you're fired up, that makes you more likely to do something about it than if you shrug your shoulders. And I think that's where a lot of people who voted for Trump that sat this one out, that's where they landed. And in Virginia, if you work for the government, I mean, that is the industry there. So a government shutdown is just bad for them overall. And I think that was part of what you saw in those results. Thank you for the call, sir. 800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com.
That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Tommy writes in, and we've actually gotten a few emails that are just like this. John, I called in yesterday from Newport Beach. Today in the mail, which is the day after the election, I received this no on Proposition 50. mailer.
What kind of complete idiot do you have to be to send the mail on a day that you know is going to result in the mail not getting there until after the election?
Well, the people that were in charge of the No on 50 campaign, those kind of idiots.
I wonder if they just started panicking when all of this negative attention started popping up, that they weren't spending the money. And they said, oh, my God, we have to spend it now. Otherwise, we're going to look awful. And they just said, all right, let's send out a bunch of mail at the last minute. And who cares if it gets there after the election?
What an embarrassment.
How many emails do we have from people saying that?
I've seen 3 today so far of someone sending us a screenshot of mail they got today that said vote no on 50.
That is so embarrassing. And I've seen some of these stories, including in Politico today, where they said they didn't have the money to be on TV and radio and other places, so they decided to do mail or they decided to do digital instead. You're telling me that you have a California team in the World Series. You do not have the money to be advertising on television and radio when any baseball fan in this state is watching those games or listening to those games, but you have money for mail that's going to get there after the election.
What can I say? Sometimes these campaigns are a grift.
And you know how this works. If you're the consultant that's working on a campaign, you get a certain cut of whatever it is that the mail costs. So you have a motivation to spend as much money on mail if you get a bigger cut, let's say, from a particular vendor doing mail than you would if you were buying the World Series. What a mess. What a complete mess. All right, let's go to Travis in Oakland. Travis, hello.
Hey, John. What the Republicans were lacking in 25 that they had in 24 is the youth vote. Not only their vote, but their door knocking, their phone banking, their social media posts. You said you didn't know any Republicans that weren't happy with Trump. That means you don't know very many Republicans that are under 30 because they're not too happy with Trump. After he didn't release the Epstein files, he's not paying attention to domestic issues enough. He's all wrapped up in foreign policy. They're trying to get ahead. And they were very active in 24. They're not necessarily against him. They're just not. And I think that's a major difference in most of these elections.
Well, you could be right. And certainly when you talk about flaky voters, you talk about voters that only show up when they're really interested. Young voters, 18 to 34, certainly fit that bill. And you look at that election party last night for Mamdani in New York City, and it was hard to find someone who looked over the age of 50 there. That was a very young skewing audience. And you don't usually see that. I mean, look at these left-wing audiences in the No Kings rallies, where it was a bunch of old guys with silver ponytails and their wives, or whoever it is that they're shacking up with. We all saw those images at those No Kings protests. That wasn't the crowd last night at the Mamdani rally. That was a very different crowd. He appealed to young people. There was an energy that was in that room that you haven't seen. You certainly didn't see that at any Kamala Harris rallies. You didn't see that at any Joe Biden rallies. But he had that last night. And that is why I do believe that Gavin Newsom, if he thinks he's going to waltz into the Democratic nomination, I think he's mistaken. And I think right now, if you're a candidate, if you're a Democratic candidate who let's call a traditional Democrat, and by that I mean a partisan Democrat who comes up through the ranks, you get elected to some lower office, then you move up to something else, and then you become governor of your state or senator, whatever. Those people, and by those people, I mean Pritzker, I mean Gretchen Whitmer, I mean Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I don't think they're going to be the threat to Gavin Newsom in the primary. I think it's going to be some Mamdani-like figure who comes out of nowhere on the left. And it could be AOC. It could be a name that we know. Could be, I guess, Jasmine Crockett, maybe. Or it could be someone that we're not even paying attention to quite yet that's going to come out of nowhere the way that Obama did when he ran for office in 2008. Only, unlike Obama never called himself a socialist, although he seems downright giddy that Mamdani just got elected, which is strange for an alleged capitalist. But I think you're going to see someone come out of nowhere who is, like Mamdani, a self-described socialist. And if you're Gavin Newsom and you are used to these big, grandiose proclamations with no follow-through, Prop 50 is really the first time he's made a threat and had follow-through. But you look at what he's done in the past, whether it's getting rid of the nuclear facilities or having abortion providers from Arizona come to California to provide abortions, or slavery reparations. It's been big promises, no follow through. And I believe an AOC type of candidate who is now in vogue on the left would be able to slice and dice Gavin Newsom like a piece of chicken at Benihana's. Because what do you say when you're going up against the real thing? If this is what Democratic voters are interested in right now, why go for the fake thing when you can have the real thing? No one goes to Red Lobster and orders the chicken. All right, it's the Fix California Hour. Up next, Professor Barbara Stone joins us. Don't you go anywhere.